That union, of course, is what gives birth, but it takes place within the womb of the sacred feminine, our mothers. As women, our womb is that temple from which we have a direct experience of Shakti, meaning not just women, but men and women. It's in our direct connection with what it is to be alive that we discover this connection to Shakti or the sacred feminine. But I think it's important to know that really Shakti is inseparable from Shiva and is not as gender limited as sometimes people might translate Shakti as the great goddess.
Namaste. You're listening to the Sivana Podcast. Join us on an exploration of Eastern spirituality, yoga philosophy, and conscious living for the new age. This podcast is a production of SavannahSpirit.com, the best place to shop for unique clothing, spiritual handcrafted jewelry, healing gemstones, and fair trade gifts from the Far East. Now, here's your host, Brett Larkin.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Sivana Podcast. As always, we've got a really great guest in store for you today. Before we dive in, I want to remind you to head on over to savannahspirit.com/contest to enter each and every week for the chance to win an $100 gift card for the Savannah Spirit store. In today's episode, we are going to learn how to step into our courage and connect with our Shakti energy, regardless of whether you are man or woman, in this very powerful conversation with Master Yogini, Shiva Rea. Shiva Rea is the founder of Prana Vinyasa Yoga. She's integrated the roots of Vinyasa, Yoga, Ayurveda, and Tantra in creative and life-transforming courses, workshops, retreats, and trainings, as well as in over 27 home practice DVDs. She's teaching next at the Arise Music Festival, August 4th through 6th in Loveland, Colorado. And in our conversation today, Shiva Rea is going to share with us her personal evolution from the structure of Ashtanga yoga to listening to what she calls her own sway. And she's going to teach us how to access this as well. But this led to her actually finding her own style of yoga, which she now shares and teaches around the world. She's going to share with us how she creates time and space for her personal practice. And we're going to get to hear the story of her own Shakti awakening. And we're going to share with you how you can tap into your own prana and courage, whether you're practicing alone at home or attending one of the amazing yoga and music festivals where Shiva Rea often teaches. Shiva, thank you so much for being on the show today. I'm so glad to have you here.
Yes, thank you.
I'm curious to hear about what the yoga landscape looked like when you first entered it years ago and what brought you to the practice. And you've transformed the practice, I think, in so many ways through your own style of yoga and incorporating dance. Is there a particular story or anecdote where you first experienced yoga and then had some idea about how you wanted to teach and maybe transform this practice in your own way?
Yes. Well, first I want to say that, rather I don't ever feel that I'm transforming yoga, but rather as yoga transforms me, I feel we're all part of this evolution in consciousness. And certainly yoga has helped actually from all of our ancestors. Every culture in the world has their way of coming into that natural state of unified consciousness. Even I love watching animals do their own yoga, so I always say we should adopt a furry guru like a cat or a dog, and then we see that reflection of the yoga that's always inside us. And so it's funny when you ask that question, because I started yoga when I was 14 in Memphis, Tennessee. I'm a Californian by birth, but we had moved to Memphis to be with my great-grandmother. And there was only one yoga class in the entire city, and it happened just on one day of the week. And it was above a health food store. And so I would ride my bike out to this health food store and take a class by a teacher, Bob Hughes, who was from the Himalayan Institute. And so it was a very classical yoga experience of, one asana and then shavasana between, and very profound in terms of what I've always felt since I was, given the name Shiva at birth, that there's a seed, and then that seed begins to unfold and our journey unfolds. And so then when you asked me that, I thought of, again, when I first started to study Ashtanga yoga. It was after coming back from being in Kenya for a year and a half, and this new yoga studio had just opened up, and I was a freshman at UCLA, and it was called Yoga Works, and they had this class on the schedule called Ashtanga, and Mati Ezrati was teaching, and I was one of the other, students. There was just two of us in class, and then Chuck Miller came, and then gradually Patabi Joyce would come, and there would be month-long intensives with just 30 of us in the room. And so I started to go on the journey through the Krishnamacharya lineage and studied with many amazing Ashtanga teachers, Iyengar teachers, teachers from Desikachar's lineage, as well as studying with Desikachar and having the fortune later to meet Iyengar. And then I think the part which you're talking about of, the transformation that does happen after we've been simmering for many years in the practice, and even simmering and teaching. And that to me was really the initiation of awakening in Tantra and becoming a mother, and really going deeper into the Shakti traditions of yoga. So I'd say the biggest change has been in offering vinyasa as an evolution from Krishnamacharya's lineage, when a time when nobody even knew what vinyasa flow was. So each of those junctures that I've talked to you about, it was really at the very beginning of this wave that we're still riding of yoga's emergence into mainstream life in America. So I eventually had to offer what the synthesis path as Prana Vinyasa, because I feel the huge revolution that we've been in for the last 100 years is a realization of our energetic bodies. And so, just even the power of our breath, or I often say we're just in renewable energy, discovering the power of the sun, and moving now in a physical way that is totally initiated by our breath and prana was the transformation that started to happen to me. And so I had to let go of my Ashtanga practice, and I did a ritual in the year 2000. And now I teach from a base of over 40 namaskars that have slowly arisen through my practice and are taught all over the world by amazing teachers who've been part of our teacher trainings over the last 15 years. And so I teach in a mandala whenever we can, in a circle. We teach as yoga as movement meditation. And so the main difference is that is all these beautiful paths of yoga are breath centered, but literally every asana you can feel the pulsation of the breath as the underlying flow of alignment. So I would say from the outside, the biggest change, if someone was looking on the inside, is perhaps an integration of the way of the yoginis, or the way of one of my teachers, Danielle Odier, whose teacher was a yogini, Lalita Devi, where the sahaja, or the spontaneous movement, the fluid movement, or the wave-like movement of prana is really integrated. And certainly when I was first studying in the Krishnamacharya lineage, there was pretty much just holding of asanas, static asanas. And now I can see that there's a huge change in the yoga world, and I feel part of that evolution.
I would love for you to define the words Tantra, and then you also talked about a Shakti awakening. Can you tell our listeners more about both those things?
Sure. I hope I can say this in a friendly way, because I have many of my friends who are deep into Sanskrit giving me refinement all the time. Usually it's Tantra rather than Tantra, because it comes from the root tan, T-A-N, which means to weave or also to expand. And so I think the main hallmark of Tantra as it evolved, they say Tantra is the closest to kind of the indigenous roots of the, pre-Vedic culture of India, in which the Great Mother and a connection to the sacred feminine is inseparable from the sacred masculine. So most people are of Shiva and Shakti being that union of the sacred masculine and sacred feminine. So the most important thing I think about understanding Tantra for modern practitioner is that it's really the soil from which asana practice, embodied movement meditation emerges. So I've been I've been on over 15 pilgrimages back to India and also working with different scholars to really understand the role of namaskar, there's not just Surya Namaskar, but before that there were prostrations that were the kind of almost like the placeholder from which Surya Namaskar and perhaps different types of sequences of asanas emerged. So the roots of Tantra really bring us to this experience of our body as a divine vehicle, not so much a transcendent spiritual path, but one of embodying consciousness. And so that's really also the importance of Tantra kind of historically in the yoga tradition is really from like the 6th century to the 14th century, Tantra practice was always for men and women and not based on any class or caste system. So it was always a practice of yoga for all, always a practice of a kind of a body positive relationship to the full spectrum of living.
Yeah, my teacher, Alan Finger, when he talks about Tantra, he says something similar, right, about how it's bringing wisdom into our daily life, which I really love. And tell us a little bit about Shakti now. I'm curious to hear from you.
Yes. Well, of course, there's many translations of Shakti. In one, there's a more of a genderless translation of Shakti as almost inseparable of describing prana, and sometimes they'll be paired together as prana Shakti, as our life force, or sometimes described as Shakti as the manifestation of consciousness or the invisible spirit into form. And so I think because women give birth and bring literally kind of the invisible through that union with the sacred masculine, the seed, and the womb, or the lingam and the yoni, that union, of course, is what gives birth, but it takes place within the womb of the sacred feminine, our mothers. As women, our womb is that temple from which we have a direct experience of Shakti, meaning not just women, but men and women. It's in our direct connection with what it is to be alive that we discover this connection to Shakti, or the sacred feminine. But I think it's important to know that really Shakti is inseparable from Shiva and is not as gender limited as sometimes people might translate Shakti as the great goddess.
This podcast was brought to you by SavannahSpirit.com. In ancient Indian mythology, and even today, chakras are considered to be the most important energy centers in the body. It's been said that when all 7 energy points are aligned, deep spiritual development occurs. When the chakras come into balance, they bring harmony, spiritually, mentally, and emotionally. In fact, sometimes when we feel off, it's really just these energy points that need to be worked on. Celebrate the 7 chakras with a beautiful must-have chakra tank. Printed down the spine with sophisticated metallic ink, the chakras are represented by unique hand-drawn symbols. You can add a pop to your style with elegance, all while reminding yourself of the deeper spiritual truth of our world. Use the exclusive discount code PODCAST30 for 30% off your first order today. Do you want a $25 gift card from SavannahSpirit.com completely for free? It's super easy. All you have to do is fill out a quick survey with 7 short questions, and then you'll be emailed your gift card to use whenever you're ready. This survey will help us better understand the most important thing in the world, you. Go to SavannahSpirit.com/podcast survey today and claim your reward. Again, that's savannahspirit.com/podcast survey. So tell me a little bit about your background, because I correct me if I'm wrong, but I think similar to me, you have quite a large background in dance. And I'm curious to hear a little bit about how and at what moment, and you talked a little bit about this, but all of a sudden it went from strict Ashtanga yoga to maybe pulling in some of that more fluid movement, or maybe were you drawing from your background in dance? Can you tell us about that?
Yes, and forgive me because I think you did say, well, what was the Shakti awakening?
Yes, I definitely want to hear about your Shakti awakening if you're willing to share.
Yeah, of course, some things I feel when we have these direct mystical experiences that are really beyond our cognitive mind, there's an aspect of that is always kind of private in a way. So I'm going to describe my experience in a way that I hope others can recognize this experience of Shakti awakening within us. And, I really began studying dance from an intrinsic love of movement. But how my path moved, I didn't receive like formal Western ballet or modern dance training. I went to UCLA thinking that I was going to be studying really the anthropology of dance. And I ended up getting much deeper into world dance and studying many, many different forms, about 8 different forms of West African dance, and Balinese Legong and Javanese court dance, and then in India studying Odissi dance and Bharatanatyam. So these forms started to definitely create this experience of, let's say, the yoga of dance, and particularly forms that have, like in the Devadasi tradition in India, where classical dance emerges, there's this experience that the ritual of dance opens the dancer to being moved by the spirit, by the spirit of the divine, a larger current than oneself. And I think, of course, dancers who are involved in creative expression and modern dance, I had so many amazing mentors also, even though that wasn't my main form of study, but in terms of improv and kind of awakening the creative flow before we kind of begin to stylize it into performance. And I think that's the interesting space that yoga and dance can deeply inform each other. And I think sometimes the technical aspect of structural asana can be a imposition upon people having this experience of, we would say the maha, informing the aham, that great tantric mantra of aham maha, the individual sacred expression, deeply moved by the greater breath of life. And when that becomes an experience that either it can be in a ritual context, or what started to happen to me is I would be in my personal Ashtanga practice and I would come down from a back bend. And I think everyone who is in asana practice in some way knows that experience after a back bend. You're like saturated with bliss, isn't it? And I started to feel in the pause points in between these experiences with the Great Mother, particularly in just resting on my belly and in a prostration. And it started to become this slow but intimate change. And I started to feel, particularly from being pregnant, that this inner movement has a heat that when we hear of Kundalini Shakti, or the Kundalini Shakti rising as a reflection of this creative power, when that intimately starts to happen to you, and it's not exactly like it's described in the books, and yet at the same time there's an intimacy, a knowing, just like when we're resting in the arms or we're hugging our own mother or father, there's a bond, there's a knowing. And that inner current started to lead me on a different quest. And that took me into more of the sahaja, or the spontaneous flow traditions in yoga, and kind of getting off the beaten path, and then finding this amazing martial art tradition called Kalaripayattu, in which we actually practice inside an earthen temple without a floor. We practice on the raw earth, and we're completely surrounded in four corners by living altars, and every day there's a puja, and at the main altar is dedicated to Shiva and Shakti, but it's just these beautiful black stones with 7 steps representing the 7 chakras. And so I've been studying for the last 12 years Kalaripayat, and it's a Vira tradition. It has, in a way, some of the sweaty intensity of Ashtanga, but it's a much more intrinsic spiritual practice. We're always touching the earth. We're touching our heart. And I go back for Navaratri, which is the 9-day festival for the great goddess. And there's 3 days of puja. And so all of that starts to create this more 24/7 living connection to the flow of Shakti. And in a way, the Shakti awakening that I was describing is part of so many meditations, or so many times where I came to my practice and from difficulty, or from just, it's a normal day, or wow, what an extraordinary day. And having experiences that are beyond me begin to heal me and change the unfolding of asana. And so this orientation towards movement meditation is what has led to these 40 namaskars that are dedicated to the elements, and the bhakti namaskars that are dedicated to the different rays of the one. So it's been a huge unfolding to have this intimate experience of our life force, our creative intelligence. And my prayer is that this is awakened in all beings, because it's with us at all times. It's more, are we aware of its power?
I think this is a great transition to start talking about festivals and your work at music festivals. Before we do that, I'm curious, do you think that listeners or people at home who, whether they have a dedicated Ashtanga practice or maybe they have a dance background like me, can they have this same direct experience with Shakti that you did? And do you have any tips, like maybe putting on music and just dancing and allowing yourself to be moved? Or I really connected with you when you just mentioned lying on the floor. Do you have any tips for people at home who want to tap into this energy?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and one thing is, I really want to say that I'm very grateful for my Ashtanga lineage and all of my teachers in Krishnamacharya. And I call it like, we don't know our destiny as we're growing as a fruit on the tree. And sometimes it is our destiny to change. And so the biggest change for me, and what I'm really passionate about, is the power of pranam, or prostrations, as a kind of ritual groove that almost, everybody can do it. And I can even share a link with you. It's something that on the summer solstice and in the fall equinox, we try and encourage all around the world. And it's like, when you have a simple home practice that you can also begin your practice with, it isn't about trying to get anywhere, but kind of being as authentic and connected as possible to really the naked ground of breath and awareness that is animating us. It's like this ground of being. So anyone, if our listeners, I'll share a link with you. So if they want to see this as a practice, they're welcome to join us. But just coming either down onto the earth, or it can be also on all fours, like a pre-cat's breath, or even just as you're sitting now, start to feel a slight wave in the base of your pelvis. If you're sitting, it'll feel like you're on a horse or you're on a surfboard. It'll be a kind of rocking forward and back. If you're on your belly on the earth, it might feel more like a side-to-side sway. And as soon as you begin a few rounds of that, you start to feel the natural oscillation of our life force, the natural, almost like cellular respiration. We could say the dance of our own rhythmic body. And that sway, that pulse begins to have an intelligence that, whether it's for a few breaths or 5 minutes or an entire practice, will unfold moment by moment. And that's what I think becomes so extraordinary, that the subtlest sway can have a profound healing after we've experienced all these intense asanas. isn't it amazing that sometimes it's the simplest movement, this intimacy of the breath rising inside us, that can create a profound healing. So it's really about opening to our life force and our breath as this fluid flow, a wave that is always present, and then just moving the pelvis either forward or back or slightly side when you're in asanas. We have a whole system that unfolds this prana flow pulsation, and it's a kind of a way of teaching alignment. But in terms of just organic movement, beginning on your own, I think it's the most intelligent way to begin a practice. Is like, let your being be an open canvas and see how this experience of Prana Shakti can, almost like it shines a light. It's like a current that travels through your body, and it reveals the places not only of tightness and tension, but the places that have become kind of dull or disembodied or disconnected.
This podcast was brought to you by SavannahSpirit.com. For thousands of years, yak jewelry has played an important part in the culture of Tibet. Both as a decorative and spiritual pursuit, yak jewelry gives a symbolic and literal healing to the wearers. Tibetans take this very seriously and treat this jewelry with reverential respect. When making yak jewelry, only the bones of yaks that died a natural death are used, and Buddhist monks pray over these bones and bless them. The history, materials, healing power, and intention behind this jewelry is truly powerful. Different stones and malas are combined in order to give different healing effects. Turquoise helps the sinus cavity, cataracts, and headaches. Copper aids arthritis, joint pain, and helps with zinc deficiency. Coral improves blood circulation, eye problems, and just helps balance your energy. Check out the fair trade Tibet healing bracelets at SavannahSpirit.com. They come in black, red, and white, so there's something for every outfit. Use discount code PODCAST30 for 30% off your first order today. Hello, my friends. I just wanted to give you a quick reminder that each purchase you make with SavannahSpirit.com goes towards the nonprofit Seva Child. For about a year, we've had the honor to work with this incredible humanitarian organization. Seva Child distributes vitamin A to deficient children in India, preventing blindness and a host of life-threatening illnesses that would otherwise go untreated. This is perhaps the most important endeavor SavannahSpirit.com has ever undertaken. So don't forget, with each purchase, you can make a difference. I love what you're describing. I'm going to try it after my next practice to just sort of tap into, I love how you call it like this, that just sway, that pulsation. I was really connected when you were talking about that. And it sounds very intimate and something like I can definitely, and the listeners can definitely experience at home, on their own, in their personal practice. Tell us now about the flip side of that. What is this experience change? What is it like when all of a sudden you are at a festival surrounded by hundreds, maybe thousands of other people? What's that experience like?
Well, I do think it's a progression that starts from just the vulnerability of just beginning to teach. And, it was a threshold for me when I first started teaching, just to, stand up in front of people and be willing to lead the practice. And I think now, after that kind of has just gradually expanded from larger and larger classes to being able to be, large scale movement meditation, even like I was involved in yoga on the Mall just right before the election, and we were under Washington Monument. And just to have thousands of people moving and breathing together, for me, is a really humble honor. And that, to me, is like the most important anchor for a collective movement meditation, is that who's ever leading it is, in a way, kind of the ability to drop down into my own heart, down into my own roots, and then offer what is been simmering inside, but in a spontaneous way, and then see this magic that unfolds that is only able to unfold from the collective itself. So for me, the power of festivals and what's changed me from teaching in festivals around the world is that it really isn't the place of instructional detail. It's the place for us to remember a movement pattern that can actually, even though we're coming from all different walks of life and from every background, we can be unified in our flow and breath and movement together. And then, of course, working with amazing musicians or DJs, the whole integration of music and yoga. Many people say they have some of their greatest epiphanies or experiences of flow states in these festival classes, because we realize, as it is in everyday life, we are a living interconnected organism. And it's so wonderful when we can feel the power of that in a way that's open and free.
What I'm hearing you say is that it sounds like you're not going into these festival classes with, a class plan that's written out in a notebook. You are just almost there and improvising somewhat, like.
No. Because I teach from a base of like 40 different namaskars. It's think of like a DJ when they go to a festival. They definitely have their playlists, but they have all these different options according to how the energy moves. Do you know what I mean? And so I think that's what, teachers who've been teaching for a while bring to large scale movement festivals, is we have the experience to be able to draw from these different pathways in the moment and be live. Do you know what I mean? So it's not exactly just like, whatever goes. It's like taking intentionality and then now letting it totally be activated by what's going to happen live. So actually there's a lot of pathways, but hopefully you don't feel it as that way. You know what I mean? Like a chef has to gather all the ingredients, the good ingredients.
Yeah, it's like this balance between structure and freedom that yoga is so teaching us, and it sounds like that's true as you're teaching as well. For folks who are new teachers, because I know we do have listeners who are either going very deep in their personal practice or they're just starting to teach, can you tell us about finding that courage to really establish your own style of yoga, to really listen to this voice that was encouraging you to explore beyond the Ashtanga tradition? How did you get that confidence to pursue that and share it?
Well, one of the things that we really cultivate in Prana Flow in Prana Vinyasa is, I like to call it like a confident humility or a humble confidence, because what I've experienced is that the cells of our body have a wisdom. And when you speak to the cells of the body, they respond. In other words, I never had the feeling like I'm going to go and I'm going to create a new style of yoga. And I still don't feel that way. I do feel, though, that each person is part of the evolution. And I started to feel uncomfortable in my body with a couple of things. One, the feeling of standing on the stage and everybody looking at me as if I'm going to do this yoga for them, because there's no flow state that can be created. I can't possibly make this happen for them. So it's like the first thing we do is enter a movement meditation with the kind of basic pulsations of the elements, and immediately within 5 breaths, we start to feel that our breath is guiding us all, or the teacher that is guiding us all is right here within the flow of our movement. So that's one of the things that I try and really help teachers in our teacher training is, feel yourself as a vessel before you begin. Because if we're focusing on ourselves or our personal brand, it's like walking through an ego minefield. And the personal self-talk and self-criticism is already enough, So I think, so beautiful, Patanjali's offering of Ishvara Pranidhana Va. Like before we begin anything, to just feel ourselves as a vessel. It's a very universal kind of spiritual teaching, and then find the sensation of the ground of our heart, and then from that moment translate yoga to who is there with you in the room. I've taught in so many different backgrounds and contexts. It's like we don't have to use a language that invokes the kind of the spirituality, or I've been using a lot of the actual Sanskrit words as we've been speaking together, but to feel like we're actually speaking to the cells of our students, to the life force within them, and serving them rather than teaching them. And that to me creates this feeling of every class is like this opportunity to be taught by the life force itself, rather than having such a strong identity. I'm the teacher. I'm going to, particularly with new teachers, I think people have a pressure feeling that they need to really show that they know, so much about structural alignment or anatomy. But the thing is your students, their cells have their own needs. The cells need to replenish themselves. They need to cleanse themselves. They need to come into equilibrium. And it's not a time to impress our students. Rather, particularly in a flow-based practice, to be able to be grounded in our own flow, be grounded in our body. And if we feel insecurities and things arising, can we be compassionate to ourselves? Can we be humble? Can we, at the beginning of our practice, always feel a connection to your teachers or to your altar? And you can be in the middle of a corporate yoga class in the middle of an urban center. You could be teaching in juvenile hall. It's the same technique. Become a vessel, become grounded in our heart, be humble, serve our students. And even when you need to be ballsy, there's a way when people feel when you're in your ego or when I mean ballsy is like, sometimes it's a very Vira energy, warrior energy that you may be called upon. I love teaching solar practices, but I also have been around, in Kalaripayat, warriors who are very integrated in their heart and very humble. So that's my humble suggestion.
I love everything you said. And I know as a teacher, you give so much, you travel so much, and we're coming up on the end of our time with you. But before we let you go, I wanted to ask you, as you teach and travel and are so busy, how do you manage to protect and take care of your time? Because I know you are also a mother. What do you have a morning routine that looks a particular way? Or I'm sure our listeners would just love to hear about your personal practice and how you're protecting that time.
I think it's one of the great challenges for everybody in this day and age, mainly because we've really moved into a 24/7, 7-day-a-week, possibility where, I have friends all over the world, partners all over the world. So sometimes I need to be flexible and at the same time also have, when I say, have boundaries that are like you're guarding a wilderness. And it's really important to do. And I think the most transforming thing that my partner and I, we really try and live is when at whatever the most sacred times of the day or the week for you, as much as possible, treat those times like your retreat time. And if all possible, of course, everyone knows unplugging. So for us, Monday is was Monday, and it's, of course, in India, it's a day for Shiva. So I think the Monday blues is that often people don't want to go back. They feel this like, wait, Monday, what a wonderful day to be like the moon and to listen and do more of the creative aspects of one's life rhythm. And in terms of practice, I personally love the sunset time. And when I'm really grounded in my rhythm, I like to be up early and be in meditation and mantra with the sunrise, and be more in physical movement with the sunset. That's just my natural rhythm. So I try and keep those potent times of the day as, like a wilderness. Try not to fill those sacred times the best we can. And I think the most important thing is to have a flexible practice that you can still maintain on a daily basis. So for instance, in our system, we have these namaskars. And so you can practice a namaskar, and it's a 20-minute practice, and you can go into meditation, or you can even go into some deeper asanas. Very easy to have a shorter and a longer practice that's connected to the continuity of one's evolution.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because I think a lot of us have this impression that big teachers are, strictly up at 5 a.m. or 4 a.m. every single morning. And what you're saying is that you do have these sacred times of the day, but that we all just have to embrace flexibility, and that you are as well, as you schedule and collaborate with people from all over the world. And I appreciate you saying that about the sunset too, because I think a lot of people get home from work and they think, they kind of miss their opportunity for that powerful practice. And you're saying that actually it is at the sunset that you like to do more of a movement practice. So I think that's really exciting and a great message to share. Wonderful. Do you have any last words or little tokens of wisdom you want to share before we let you go? Any advice for listeners as they manage the busy schedule we all have?
Yeah, I think I just want to encourage us to be tender and loving with ourselves and with each other. We've never lived in times like these before, and that's also the incredible potentiality that's we're living in, and at the same time, this vulnerability. And it's really important to be engaged and to be an activist in whichever way you're called. So my focus is on energy activism and connecting with indigenous roots wherever I go. So I'm very involved with connecting with the Shumash here at Wishtoyo Shumash Village, and we have a solar lantern project and a solar home and an electric car, and just try and, carbon offset and just keep the message. This is going to happen by the people asking for the changes that are in our inevitable right, that while we are alive, we will see the end of fossil fuels. It's outdated. We have all the power we need in renewable energy. So I keep reminding myself like that, like, wow. And I'm not just saying that as a pipe dream. It's happening in countries all over the world, went from energy dependence to energy independence. And I think that's really kind of the paradigm for each one of us is we have a chance to access the power of our healing life force. And we've just begun. So let's celebrate the potential that is now. Let's come together in festivals. Let's rise in activism locally and globally. And let's not let fear create the anxiety, which really is an inhibition to the kind of daily life connection that will really bring change in the world. So stay tender, loving, courageous, and I look forward to seeing you down the path, and I hope at Arise Festival coming up.
Thank you so much. So listeners, you can connect with Shiva at shivaray.com, and you can go see her along with 200 other live music performers at the Arise Music Festival coming up in August in Colorado. Thank you so much. I really, really honor the time you spent with us today. I know you are so busy, so thank you, and we'll chat with you again hopefully soon. Namaste. Hi everyone, Brett here with an announcement. We are starting a weekly contest giveaway over at Savannah Spirit. If you'd like to enter the contest to win one of our weekly prizes, go to savannahspirit.com/contest. If you enjoyed listening to the podcast today, would really appreciate it if you went over to iTunes and left us a review. Leave us some comments. We love your feedback, and share this podcast with anyone who you think might also enjoy it. I also wanted to invite you to go check out Savannah East, which is the name of our blog, and also the name of our Facebook group, where you can ask questions, see who's coming on the show, and share your ideas. We will post the most recent episodes there, as well as interesting articles relating to our guests and topics on the shows. Again, thank you so much for listening, and from my heart to yours, namaste.
You've been listening to the Sivana Podcast. To find out more about Savannah, go to savannahspirit.com or follow Savannah on Facebook at facebook.com/Savannah Spirit. For daily inspiration, check out our blog at savannaheast.com. Be sure to join us next week for a new episode, and thank you for listening to the Sivana Podcast.